so this little number crossed my Twitter feed last night, and I literally said, "Are you shitting me?" And so it's time for a review. This article in Forbes here, apparently this is from September 8th, 2020, but it hit me through Twitter last night. And so I wanted to read through this a little bit, and I will preface this in saying that I looked a little bit at the article itself, or at least as much of it that I could get a hold of, because the article itself is behind a paywall that even I can't get through right now. So I will make a point here of mentioning that, but this beautiful number, why speaking English may spread coronavirus more than other languages. More coronavirus than some other language, whatever. Here's the thing. New research suggests that, this showed up in Forbes, new research suggests that English speakers put more droplets into the air when they talk, which may make them more likely to spread COVID-19. Since the novel coronavirus is spread by droplets, how spitty a language is. That's not something I thought I would ever say. Spitty a language is might contribute to different rates of the disease. It all comes down to something called aspirated consonants. The sounds that we make that spray more droplets of saliva into the air. In college, everyone knew which professor spit the most when they lectured. The front rows of their classes were always empty after the first day of class because the high achievers who sat there had been bathed with the lecturer's saliva. When a lecture was particularly boring, students might find themselves fascinated by the way the sunlight caught drops of spit hanging in the air around the professor. Memories of the teachers who were the loud talkers is one thing, and yet now we know that simply speaking English could mean we are all spitting on the people around us. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at this. I don't know of any professor where this has happened. I went through 12 years in college, from bachelor's degree through PhD. Honest to God, I never had this problem. And I often sat in the front because even with my glasses, sometimes my eyesight sucked when I was in college. So I needed to be in the front to see what was going on anyway. So it didn't matter. And I did not get covered in saliva. So I don't know what you're talking about, that you had a professor that would spit that much when they were talking. Okay, comment below. Comment below if you had a professor like that in college who you actually avoided sitting in the front row because they were a profuse spitter. I'm sorry, this is just garbage. But anyway, of course, me being me, and if you caught the CNN review on the article that CNN pushed, that, hey, conservatives are more likely to believe false news. Note to self, it's not true. Anyway, this is interesting. So I went to go look here, and the idea with it that they're going here in the article is that the English language has more aspirated consonants in it, so that you are breathing out more when you're speaking English than you are other languages. That's the idea. And therefore you are exhaling more droplets that could be potential with viral load and all that kind of stuff than you are with other languages. Here's the thing about that. What they didn't tell you, this is a nice headline, and this headline is a great example of terrible science journalism. I will point to you in a second that the abstract of the article is also a terrible example of poor communication of the abstract. So they included one image in the graphical abstract. Like I said, I unfortunately can't get to the article because it's behind a paywall. But thankfully, I don't need to get to the article because the graphical abstract and little bits of information that I did get from clicking on the link right here actually demonstrate quite well that the study is full of crap. I'm sorry, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a climate scientist for a living, but I can see an awful lot of crap in here, and that's worse than the spitting saliva. So this is the thing in the article in question that they actually point to. It's in the journal Medical Hypotheses, November 2020. It was originally published online last June, actually, so it's a year old now, but this is a gem of an article, I gotta say. COVID-19 is transmitted through sneezing and coughing, which constitutes its basic symptoms due to the high velocity of droplets produced by these activities. However, what horrible grammar. However, recent studies have demonstrated that a large quantity of droplets may be produced even by talking or breathing. Studies with respect to the effect of phenome type, the main sound unit of speech, on the production of droplets are only few in number. For example, this particular reference right here argued that SARS, which could be transmitted through droplets, did not infect 1 to 3 millions of Japanese who traveled to China in 2000, while American visitors in China at the same period were infected. The author added that Japanese aspirated stops, like I don't know what they're referring to there, which are said to produce a lot of droplets, are not used in much in Japanese compared to English. Therefore, he concluded the fact that the Chinese shop assistants who might have been speaking to Japanese tourists in Japanese, but to American tourists in English, might explain the zero infection of Japanese tourists. In this paper, we support the hypothesis reported in EUA, I guess that's the first reference, that aspirated consonants might produce more droplets in comparison to unaspirated consonants. To check these hypotheses, we have taken the 26 countries mostly infected, more than 1,000 cases, by COVID-19 as of the 23rd of March 2020. We excluded Switzerland since there are many official languages in its territories. Also, we excluded outliers, that is, countries with many cases, for example, Italy, or very few cases, Japan, per million population. The independent t-test analysis conducted in R showed no significant differences in the cases of infected individuals between the languages with aspiration and the languages without aspiration. In other words, let me read that again. The independent t-test analysis conducted in R, which is a programming language, by the way, for those unfamiliar, showed no significant differences in cases of infected individuals between languages with aspiration and languages without aspiration. Which is to say the following. There was no statistically significant difference depending upon the amount of aspirated consonants that were there. All right? The more aspiration of consonants did not give you a statistically significant difference to those who had less aspirated consonants with the official languages of countries. That didn't get reported in Forbes. And I'll tell you what. Because this is the image that came with it. So let me explain this image for you. Average cases per million people of population. This is countries where there's very little aspiration of consonants. This is countries where there's a lot of aspiration of consonants. So English would be in here. This overlaps so much. That's why there's no statistically significant difference. There's some crazy outliers up here. I would love to know which countries this is. Countries those are. But there's no statistically significant difference. And yet Forbes writes the fucking headline that if you speak English, you're more likely to spread COVID. That's not true. That is not what the paper said, Forbes. You fucking idiots. Can you write it? But here's what gets better. This is what ticks me off. Although no statistical differences were found between the two types of languages, we observed that countries in which the dominant language has aspirated consonants, there were more cases of individuals infected by COVID-19 in comparison to countries in which the dominant language does not have aspirated consonants. These findings can offer epidemiological implications for COVID-19 transmission in each country, since this transmission may be based on, to some extent, on whether there are or no aspirated. Oh my gosh, that's poor phrasing of that sentence. Consonants in the dominant language spoken in each country. And yet, you just told me there's no significant difference based upon aspiration. And yet you're telling me that if the dominant language has more aspiration, well, they have more consonants. And yet you've told me there's no statistical significant difference. Can you see the double language here? They're trying to make a conclusion out of something, and yet they can't admit the fact that their hypothesis was wrong. That's the real nugget to take from this here. That hypothesis was wrong. That Forbes headline is wrong. No, actually, there's not a statistically significant difference there. I'm sorry. And I would love to. I'm going to have to say it, but I call bull on this. Unfortunately, I can't access the rest of the article to look at it. I would be curious. Amount of statistics that I do, I can make things here. It's like they showed no statistical significant difference. That graphic shows, I can intuit from the graphic that there's probably no statistically significant difference. And yet, you're trying to tell me that if you have more aspirated consonants in your dominant language, you are more likely to spread COVID and get infected. So, at the same time, as the data says no, you're trying to tell me yes. Congratulations. And this has been your quick review of the Spitty situation, of the Spitty talkers in English. Anyway, in other words, Forbes is wrong. Forbes is wrong, and it doesn't actually reflect what the study says. We'll put it that way. And I think here that the authors of the study were trying to get away, trying to make a claim that is not necessarily valid when you have very little statistical significance here to actually back that up. And frankly, this is very little difference. These overlap almost identically to me, and I would not call that being a statistical significant difference, and I would not call it that, dominant country here. You notice the thing where the dominant language is whatever, but you are not considering any other factors in this. There were no other explanatory factors discussed in here on how they may have ruled that out or anything like that. So again, I can't, based on this study, nope, I can't draw that conclusion. That's not a wise conclusion, and that Forbes article was horrendously wrong. Anyway, so Forbes, this is lousy writing on your part. You didn't look into the caveats of the study. You didn't look into the fact that there was actually no statistical significant difference. Too bad there. Okay, so that's my rant on stupid science and stupid science journalism. Here that comes up on occasion, more stupid science journalism than stupid science. I will be perfectly honest there. But again, I would love to see the authors answer my questions. I don't mean to be harsh about it, for lack of a better way, but I'm sorry, I don't think your conclusion is supported by what you put there, so I would like to hear you defend it a little bit more. I'll end it on a conciliatory note. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video, comment on this video. That's the video here. Of course, you can also catch up with me on SciWorthy, SciWorthy on Locals at sciworthy.locals.com. Become a supporter there. You can chat with myself and other scientists who are part of the platform. Anyway, that's it for now. Until next time, I'm Adrian. Stay curious, my friends.